Interactive reading is actually not one question, but it is a set of 6 questions. So it's really more like a section than it is a question. It comes in the interactive reading and interactive listening section, and you will have to answer 2 sets of interactive reading questions on the DET. For each set, you will have 7 or 8 minutes to complete all 6 of the questions. Okay, so 6 questions, 7 or 8 minutes, approximately 1 minute per question. It's very important to note that there is just one timer for all 6 questions. So when you start an interactive reading set of questions, that timer for 7 or 8 minutes will start, and it will run for all 6 questions. So you need to learn how to pace yourself, because if you take too much time on the early questions, you won't have time for the later questions. You may not even have time to answer them, and you will get 0 points. Okay, so it's very important that you learn how to pace yourself by doing practice questions inside of Arno. It's also important to point out that the questions always appear in the same order. So I am going to now walk you through each question, and on the test, the questions will appear in this order. The first question you will see is complete the sentences. So you will be given a passage and words will be missing. This makes it similar to fill in the blanks or read incomplete. However, here you don't need to type in the missing letters. Also, the entire word is missing, not just some letters. Rather, you are given options to select the missing word. So this is a multiple choice type of question. A small thing to point out that's quite convenient, I find, is when you hover over any of these options on the test, it will automatically take whatever word you are hovering over and put it into the passage, which makes it easy to see that option in context. So you can read the entire sentence and see if the option makes sense. Okay, so a little tip there. Tips for success for the complete the sentences question type. Use the tips, tricks, and strategies we talked about for fill in the blanks and read and complete. Read the full passage. So when you come to the interactive reading and you get that passage with all the missing words, you should actually read the whole passage, even though there are missing words, obviously, so that you have the context and know what it is about. If you don't know what an answer is for one of the blanks, that's fine. Skip it and come back to it later. Don't get stuck on the missing word. You need to keep moving. Also, by figuring out other missing words in the passage, that will often make it easy to come back to a word that you couldn't get the first time and figure out what the answer is. Use process of elimination. This will be the main strategy that's going to help you the most to do well on the complete the sentences question in interactive reading. So let me show you how this strategy works. For each option that you see for a missing word, you want to ask yourself these questions. Is this word grammatically correct? So if this word is in the sentence, is the sentence grammatically correct? And 2, does this word make sense in the passage? So if you see that a word is not grammatically correct, you can eliminate it. You don't have to ask yourself the second question, because that can't be the answer. But if a word is grammatically correct, then you want to ask yourself, okay, but does it make sense in the passage? Is it the right word for the passage? Let me show you some examples so that you can see exactly how this strategy will help you. So let's read the entire passage, which is what you should do on the test. At first, Zainab and Omu really enjoyed blank at work and making new friends. But after a blank weeks, they began to blank overwhelmed and wondered whether they could handle working full time. The building was big and the office blank enormous. There were probably blank, if not thousands of employees. Some worked in offices while blank worked at home. They were assigned to a small blank of people who they had to work blank. The group assigned to them was blank up of almost complete strangers, so blank felt intimidated at work. So there were a lot of missing words there. Of course, you don't understand the entire passage, but that's not the goal of reading it all. The goal is to get the context. So what is this passage about? Well, this passage is about the experience of working a new job from two people named Zainab and Omu. Okay, so we generally know that this passage is about work, working in an office, working with other people, those types of things. That context helps us to figure out what words are missing. All right, so let's look at this first blank. At first, Zainab and Omu really enjoyed blank at work and making new friends. All right, well, let's use process of elimination to see which answers are incorrect. So, is practicing correct? At first, Zainab and Omu really enjoyed practicing at work and making new friends. Well, we should ask ourselves first, is it grammatically correct? Yes, practicing in this sentence is grammatically correct. So then we have to ask ourselves the second question, does it make sense? Well, at first, Zainab and Omu really enjoyed practicing at work and making new friends. What do you think? I don't think that really makes sense. So practicing at work, we don't really practice at work. We practice hobbies or sports or music, but we don't really practice at work. Also, practicing doesn't really connect with making new friends. So I don't think that this option really makes sense, so I'm going to say I don't think that this is the correct answer. What about work? At first, Zainab and Omu really enjoyed work at work and making new friends. Technically, it is grammatically correct. It's a little weird, but the second question, does it make sense in the passage, should be a clear no. Okay, Zainab and Omu really enjoyed work at work. That just doesn't make sense. All right, so we can eliminate that option too. What about being? At first, Zainab and Omu really enjoyed being at work and making new friends. It is grammatically correct. It's the right verb tense. And two, does it make sense in the passage? Yes. Well, they really enjoyed being at work and they enjoyed making new friends. So being in this sentence really seems to make a lot of sense. But just because you are confident in an answer doesn't mean you should stop there. You need to evaluate all of the options. So let's keep going. What about feeling? At first, Zainab and Omu really enjoyed feeling at work and making new friends. Okay, it's grammatically correct, but does it make sense in the passage? Not really. They really enjoyed feeling at work. We feel emotions, but there's no emotion here. So I don't think that that's a very plausible answer. All right, what about others? At first, Zainab and Omu really enjoyed others at work and making new friends. So first, it's grammatically correct. They really enjoyed others at work and making new friends. But let's ask ourselves if it makes sense in the passage. So they really enjoyed others at work and making new friends. It actually kind of makes sense, right? It's basically saying that they enjoyed other people or others and making new friends. So this is why it's important to read all of the options, because on the DET, there can often be multiple options that are correct. So what I mean by that is there will be options that seem correct, that could be correct. However, they are not the best option. So in this case, we have to decide between being, which is the other option that seems strong, and others. Okay? So at first, Zainab and Omu really enjoyed being at work and making new friends. Or at first, Zainab and Omu really enjoyed others at work and making new friends. Both are fine. They work grammatically. They make sense. However, being is the stronger option. That is the one that makes slightly more sense, is a little more natural. So just to reiterate, because it's a very important point, you need to be sure to always evaluate all the options that you are given. This is because 2 or more options could be correct, and it's your job to pick the option that is the best. So you don't want to stop when you get to an option that seems correct, because there may be an even better answer further down. Let's do one more example of complete the sentences. In this second blank, it comes in the sentence, but after a blank weeks, they began to blank overwhelmed and wondered whether they could handle working full time. You'll notice in this second sentence, we have 2 missing words, which makes it much more difficult to identify both of the missing words. This would be potentially a good place where we could skip a word. So for example, if we were having a hard time with number 2, we could skip it and move to number 3, which we may find easier. And after we get number 3, we can come back to number 2, use the missing word for number 3 that we identified to help us figure out what number 2 could be. Okay? But in this case, let's see if we can get number 2 right from the beginning without having to skip it. So the first possibility for number 2 is lot. But after a lot weeks, they began to. So the first question we ask ourselves is that grammatically correct? The answer is no, that is not grammatically correct. It would be correct if we had of after lot. So this would be grammatically correct, but after a lot of weeks, they began to. However, we don't have of here. So this option is incorrect. We can rule it out. We can eliminate it. Option number 2 is few. But after a few weeks, they began to. Is that grammatically correct? Yes, that is grammatically correct. Doesn't make sense in the passage. But after a few weeks, they began to blank, overwhelmed, and wondered whether they could handle working full time. Yes, it makes sense. This is a common phrase, but after a few weeks or a few days or a few years. So this is a very promising option, but let's eliminate the other ones and make sure there isn't an even better answer. Some. But after some weeks, they began to. Is that grammatically correct? No. If there was no a, so if the sentence was, but after some weeks they began to, that would be grammatically correct. However, there is an a, and but after some weeks is grammatically incorrect. So we can rule out that option as well. What about number 4, bunch? But after a bunch weeks, they began to. This may be a little more difficult because bunch is a bit of slang. It's an English idiom. But with bunch, like with a lot, you need of after. So if the sentence was, but after a bunch of weeks, that would be correct. But there is no of in this sentence, therefore bunch is incorrect. And finally, we have many. But after many weeks, they began to. Is that grammatically correct? No. It would be correct if there was no a, but after But after many weeks, that would be correct. However, we have an A, which means but after a many weeks is incorrect. So the only option that was grammatically correct was few. So the complete the sentences question tests your vocabulary, but it also can test your grammar, as we saw in this example here. If you are finding this lesson helpful, please be sure to like and subscribe. It takes you just a moment, but it really helps us out. If you want more lessons like this, then you should check out our Score Increase Guarantee course. In that, we have lessons like this on every single question type that you will see on the test. We also have exercises and assignments and one-on-one tutoring and feedback. All of this will help you to make sure that you get the score that you need on the test. In fact, we are so confident that our course will help to raise your score that we guarantee it. So if your score does not increase after completing our course, we will give you your money back, simply put. So to check out that course, just click the link down in the description. So if we continue to answer the complete the sentences questions like this, eventually we will have filled in all of the blanks. There won't always be 10 blanks like you see in this example. There will often be fewer, but you'll have somewhere around 7 to 10. Once you fill in all of the blanks, then you should check your answers by reading the entire passage. Basically, proofreading to make sure that all of your answers make sense within the larger passage, okay? So let me read through and see whether all my answers make sense. At first, Zainab and Omo really enjoyed being at work and making new friends. But after a few weeks, they began to feel overwhelmed and wondered whether they could handle working full time. The building was big and the office was enormous. There were probably hundreds, if not thousands, of employees. Some worked in the offices while others worked at home. They were assigned to a small group of people who they had to work with. The group assigned to them was made up of almost complete strangers, so they felt intimidated at work. So, by reading the entire passage, I can be even more confident that all of my answers are correct because all of the sentences read very well. There were no awkward parts or any parts that didn't make sense. Once you answer all of the complete the sentences questions, you will move to the complete the passage question. So here you have your old part of the passage that we just filled in the missing words in, and we're given a new part of the passage, and it's our job to pick the sentence that goes between the old part and the new part. So tips for success for this question type. Read the entire first part. So we read the entire first part to proofread. However, if you get any questions wrong, then you can read the whole passage and see any of your mistakes. So that's not so that you can know how many points you lost, but rather so that you can fully understand the first part of the passage. If you misunderstand that first part, then it's going to be harder to answer the next questions correctly. Then we are going to read the entire second part. So we will read all of this. I won't do that now because I know that my answers before were correct. Okay, so we just read the passage. We're not going to do that again. Then you're going to read the second part. I will read this because this is new. They did enjoy the work they did, but it was hard at first to get used to being in the office, dealing with all the people, and working on a team. So after we read the entire first part and then read the entire second part, we're then going to use process of elimination to find the correct answer. So process of elimination for complete the passage will consist of just asking yourself this question. Does this option make sense in the passage? The reason is that all of the options you are given will be grammatically correct. Okay, so with this question type, you're not being tested on your grammar. All of the options will be grammatically correct. You are being tested on your comprehension. So that's why you only ask yourself, does this option make sense in the passage? Here's a tip that can help you to do this. Look for similar vocabulary between the options and the passage. This is an easy way to eliminate options. Let me show you with an example. So this first option here, Zainab was so nervous about giving her speech that she hardly slept the night before. The key vocabulary in this option is nervous and speech. So, do we find that vocabulary or synonyms or related vocabulary anywhere in the passage? No. So that's a strong hint that this option is incorrect. However, you still want to be sure to read the option and understand it and just think, does this make sense to go in between the old part and the new part? So, Zainab was so nervous about giving her speech that she hardly slept the night before. So, to determine that, what you are going to do with the complete the passage sentence is read the option in context. So you can see by hovering over the option, Duolingo populates it there for you. This is so that you can read it in context like this. So probably you want to read a sentence or two before and then what comes after. So in this case, the group assigned to them was made up of almost complete strangers, so they felt intimidated at work. Zainab was so nervous about giving her speech that she hardly slept the night before. They did enjoy the work they did, but it was hard at first to get used to being in the office, dealing with all the people, and working on a team. So, reading that sentence in context, does it make sense? Does it belong there? No. Okay? It doesn't fit there. It totally changes the topic. So, we can be confident that this option is not correct. The next option. The culture of the office was also very different from that of their college. The key vocabulary in this option is culture, office, and college. And that vocabulary appears in the passage. So office appears directly in the passage. The other key vocabulary we have is culture and college. So culture doesn't appear in the passage directly. However, the passage is describing the culture, the environment, what it is like to be at the office. So although the word culture isn't used, the passage discusses culture. So this option may be relevant. And finally, we have college. This is tricky because college is not found in the passage directly, and college is not talked about directly. The passage only really talks about work. Okay, so that means we should be a little careful with this option. But let's see if it works in context. The group assigned to them was made up of almost complete strangers, so they felt intimidated at work. The culture of the office was also very different from that of their college. They did enjoy the work they did, but it was hard at first to get used to being in the office, dealing with all the people, and working on a team. That sentence seems to fit well in the passage. In particular, it flows well from the previous sentence, which talks about how they felt intimidated at work. This option, the culture of the office, was also very different from their college, elaborates on the idea of why Zainab and Omu are uncomfortable at work, because the culture at work was different from their college. So that's a very promising option, but let's make sure that the remaining two options aren't even better. Omu had to take the exams again, but she didn't feel like studying for them. The key vocabulary in this option are exams. However, does the word exams appear anywhere in the passage, or any synonyms for exams like tests? No. Does the passage at all talk about studying or taking a test or anything like that? No. So we can see that this option is not a very good one. It talks about something completely unrelated to the passage. And finally, we have, so instead they decided to go to college and pursue a degree in public speaking. The key vocabulary in this option is college and public speaking. So, like we talked about with option number 2, there are no mentions of college. So that's a hint that this option isn't correct. Then there's also the option of public speaking. Is there any mention of a presentation or a public speech or anything like that? No. Okay, so probably this option isn't correct, but if we wanted to be really confident, we could also look at it in context. So we could read, the group assigned to them was made up of almost complete strangers, so they felt intimidated at work. So instead, they decided to go to college and pursue a degree in public speaking. They did enjoy the work they did, but it was hard at first to get used to being in the office, dealing with all the people, and working on a team. Okay, so this option in context kind of makes sense actually, right? You could see that they didn't like being at work, they felt intimidated, so they decided to leave work, to go to college and pursue a degree in public speaking. Okay, but then the second part of the passage, the new part of the passage reads, they did enjoy the work they did, but it was hard at first to get used to being in the office, dealing with all the people, and working on a team. Well, this passage, this part here has at first, which implies that they continued to work. Eventually, they got used to working at the office. It was just difficult at the beginning, but they pushed through and things got better. Okay? So you can see this question can be quite difficult. I find that this question is probably the most difficult of any in the interactive reading. So you want to be sure that you save time so that you can carefully consider each aspect of the options and you can really determine which one is the best answer. So this option is plausible. It could be the answer. However, the second option is better. The culture of the office was also very different from that of their college. So option number 4 isn't necessarily wrong, but option number 2 is certainly better, and that makes it the correct answer for this question. So tips for success for complete the passages: read the entire first part, then read the entire second part, then to find the missing sentence, you will use process of elimination, and the specific trick you can use to help you do that more efficiently and effectively is to look for similar vocabulary between the options and the passage. Next is highlight the answer. It looks like this. You will be given a question and the passage on the left-hand side, and you have to highlight the answer in the passage. It's important to note that you will have 2 of these questions in each set of interactive reading questions. All of the other questions appear just one time. The tips for success for highlight the answer are: 1, look for similar vocabulary between the question and the passage. And 2, highlight just the answer, no more and no less. So many students ask, can I just highlight a lot? And if the answer is inside of what I highlighted, will I get full points? The answer is no. How Duolingo grades this question is they have the correct answer. And if your response is bigger than the correct answer, you'll lose points. And if your response is smaller than the correct answer, you'll also lose points. So the only way to get full points is to highlight exactly what Duolingo considers the right answer. And tip number 3, don't panic if you make a mistake. So if you're highlighting and you highlight the wrong thing, don't panic. Until you click next, your answer isn't submitted. So you can just highlight again what you believe is the correct answer, and then you'll submit your answer once you click next. Let's look at some examples. So this question asks us, what did Zainab and Omu enjoy at first? Okay, what is the key vocabulary in this passage? Well, we have at first. And at first appears conveniently right at the beginning of the passage. All right, so that's where we can direct our attention. There's also enjoy. And enjoy appears in this first sentence as well. So we have 2 strong clues that our answer is probably here in this first sentence. That won't always be the case, okay? But by using this trick of finding the similar vocabulary between the question and the passage, you can quickly find the first place that you should look for your answer instead of having to read the entire passage, which will take a lot of time. Okay, so we found the similar vocabulary, and we can look at this first sentence to see if it contains the answer. So what did Zainab and Omu enjoy at first? Well, the first sentence reads, at first, Zainab and Omu really enjoyed being at work and making new friends. Are you able to answer this question using the first sentence? The answer is being at work and making new friends. So what did Zainab and Omu enjoy at first? Being at work and making new friends. Good. Okay, let's look at the second, highlight the answer question. What was the building like? What's the key vocabulary in this question? The building. And where does that key vocabulary appear in the passage? Here, the building. That sentence is, the building was big and the office was enormous. So, what was the building like? It was big. You may think that that's too simple or too short of an answer to be correct. However, that is the most precise answer. What was the building like? The building was big. You may be tempted to also highlight, and the office was enormous. However, the question only asks you about the building. It does not ask you about the office. So, although the answer may seem too simple, too short, big is the correct answer, and this will get full points. Number 4 is identify the idea. So you will be given 4 options, and you have to select the one that is best expressed in the passage. Basically, what is the main idea of the passage is what you're being asked here. So the tips for success for this one is to use process of elimination, and you can use this trick of looking for irrelevant vocabulary. So let me show you what I mean with an example. Option number 1 is Zainab and Omu wanted to be remembered for their success and did not want to be forgotten. The key vocabulary in this option is remembered, success, and forgotten. So, do any of those words or related words appear anywhere in the passage? No, they don't, which means that probably this option is incorrect. However, you should always read the option, understand it, and think whether the passage actually captures or expresses that idea. So we can see that at no point in the passage does it talk about how Zainab and Omu want to be remembered for their success and not be forgotten. The passage has nothing to do with that. So we can eliminate that option. The second option is Zainab and Omu enjoyed their work, but it was difficult at first to get used to working in an office environment. The key vocabulary there is enjoyed work at first, office, and we can see that that key vocabulary appears often in the passage. So that's a strong hint that this option could be correct. And when we read the option and understand it, we'll see that it makes sense. So Zainab and Omu enjoyed their work, but it was difficult at first to get used to working in an office environment. That is exactly what the passage it's talking about. It's talking about how it was challenging or difficult for Zainab and Omu to start working and to become accustomed to being in an office. So I feel very good about that option, but let's eliminate the others. Omu's father helped them prepare for the contest by teaching how to stand, walk, and move their arms. The key vocabulary there is father, contest, teaching, stand, walk, and move their arms. Does any of that vocabulary appear in the passage? No. That option clearly has nothing to do with what the passage talked about. We can confidently eliminate it. And finally, we have Zainab had been taking notes during the speech so she wouldn't forget what she was going to say. The key vocabulary there is taking notes, speech, and forget. Does any of that vocabulary or related vocabulary appear anywhere in the passage? No. So we can eliminate this option as well. That leaves only option number 2. Zainab and Omu enjoyed their work, but it was difficult at first to get used to working in an office environment. Okay, so let me just reiterate because it's important. By identifying related vocabulary and vocabulary that is not related or irrelevant to the passage, we can quickly get some strong clues about which options are correct and incorrect. However, you need to be sure that you read the options, you understand the options, and you really ask yourself if the passage expresses that idea in the option. Okay, it's not enough to just look for similar vocabulary. Question number 5 is title the passage. This is the final question in the interactive reading set of questions. So similar to the last question, you are being tested on your overall comprehension of the passage, and you're being asked to pick an appropriate title for the passage. In general, I think that this question is perhaps the easiest of all of them. So once you get to this question, you should have an easy finish. Tips for success for this question, you guessed it, process of elimination, and we can use that trick of looking for irrelevant vocabulary. So, the 2 most important people, okay, the passage talks about 2 people, Zainab and Omu, but are they important? Are they the most important people? No. The passage does not use the word important. It doesn't describe Zainab or Omu being important at all. They are ordinary employees. They are early employees who are having, in fact, a hard time at work. They're not people who are important with power, who are really having a lot of success at the office. So we can eliminate that option. The second option, the town hall meeting. Well, is there any mention of a meeting in the passage? No, the word meeting is never used, or meetings or a specific meeting is never discussed. Also, town hall is never discussed. Town hall is a meeting at the local government level. And we're not talking about local government here, we're talking about the workplace. So we can eliminate that option as well. What about Zainab and Omu's new job? Well, this option has Zainab and Omu, which is good because those are the main characters of the passage. And it says it's their new job. Well, that's exactly what the passage talked about. It talked about Zainab and Omu's experience starting to work, their experience in their new job. So that seems like the correct answer, but let's just make sure by checking the fourth option, the presentation versus the ceremony. So in the passage, is there any mention of a presentation or a ceremony or anything like that? No. So we can eliminate that option as well. And that leaves Zainab and Omu's new job. So like I said, in my experience of taking the DET and doing lots of practice tests, this question usually there's one answer that is clear, right? So you won't have this challenge of multiple answers potentially being correct and having to pick the best one. Usually there's one that stands out. However, when you take the test, maybe that won't be the case, so don't be surprised if this question is a little more difficult for you. I want to talk briefly about how to improve on interactive reading. So first is practice interactive reading. So Arno gives you unlimited practice questions for every question type for free. So it's a great way to practice interactive reading questions or any question type that you will see on the DET. So all you have to do is head over to goarno.io. There's a link down in the description. Create your free account, and in like 10 seconds, you can practice any of the questions on the test as much as you like. As you are practicing, it's important to practice pacing. So remember, you have one timer for all of the questions we just looked at. So it's important that you learn the pace that works for you. You should spend about 1 minute on each question, but you may find that you need more time for some questions, less time for others. So what I would recommend is just practice and find the pace that works best for you. Number 2 is when you get a question wrong, understand why what you put is incorrect and why the correct answer is correct. So in Arno, when you answer an interactive reading practice question, you can see the answer afterwards. And you don't just want to see the questions that you got wrong and then move on. You really want to spend time looking at the questions that you got wrong and understanding why you chose something that was incorrect and why the correct answer is actually correct. That is how you are going to improve your skills and your English and raise your score on the DET. Okay, you need to make sure that you are learning from your mistakes. Number 3, when you are reviewing your answers, use that opportunity to write down new vocabulary. So this is advice that I give in other lessons, but as you are learning English, you need to be writing down new words all the time and always expanding your vocabulary. So interactive reading, it's a reading question. You have to read this passage. So use that as an opportunity to learn new words as well. All right, that's it for this lesson. If you want to do another masterclass like this for free, check out our masterclass on fill in the blanks, which you can find here. I'll see you in that video.